in, and then we
right.
know where we're at.
And then we can test and see and make sure things are still working the way they're supposed to. And we are live.
Okay. Yay! I'm getting it.
Okay.
Yep.
Is your voice coming across?
Yeah, it's coming across.
Yeah, I just heard Tony on there.
Yeah, I haven't really read any of the news or the security, so thanks for putting the bullet points there.
Oh yeah.
um, well, I did the security stuff apart from the Debian app thing. Norbert did that. Felt it was worth putting in. And Norbert did all of the news.
It's good.
Yeah.
Well, he should be here. He did say he was coming. Let's.
Yeah. We were on together last night.
Okay, yeah. So you did make the meeting. It was just you and Norbert.
It was just me and Norbert. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Apologize for that. Had to work, unfortunately.
No. Work. If you got to work, you got to work. Haven't you?
I got kidnapped.
You got kidnapped.
Space aliens.
When my buddy showed up and was like, "We're leaving. Get over it."
Yeah.
It was exciting. And then we went to a pizza place that had no pizza.
You went to a pizza place that had no pizza.
Yeah, their pizza oven was broken.
Ah. So what did you end up having?
I had a salad. There was also meatballs.
Right.
Yeah. Do you ever eat any of those vegetarian patties or meatballs or any of that, Tony? Any of the kind of junk food?
There's stuff that you buy that's processed that they sell it as kind of healthy vegetarian stuff with no meat in it.
Right.
When you read the list of ingredients, there's more stuff on it than the
Yeah.
Eiffel Tower.
You're right.
The
It's
meat
like, I think the meat
substitutes.
would be better for you almost.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I do very occasionally, but it is very occasionally. I do most of my cooking scratch cooking.
That's the
I'll
best way.
occasionally I'll get things that are more proper veggies that are wrapped up in, say, a cheese sauce and stuff like that, and made into a patty.
No.
And when you read the list of ingredients, most of it's you can understand what it is. It's not
Right.
it's not gobbledygook.
It didn't come out of a mad scientist laboratory.
Yeah,
You're right.
but I try to avoid them most of the time. But like everyone else, occasionally I don't fancy cooking a lot. So like tonight we had a shop bought pizza, and I just slung that in the oven.
Nothing wrong with that.
I know this week I'm gonna make burrito innards again, but I think just for a change, I'm gonna order some 0-calorie noodles. And next
Zero
week,
calorie noodle.
yeah, they're not bad. They're not great, but they're not bad.
Where are they made from?
Oh gosh, I don't even remember.
Hmm.
And then I'll just meal prep some spaghetti and toss it in the freezer and then microwave it when I'm ready.
There you go.
I've never heard of 0-calorie noodles.
The shirataki, they're made from shirataki. It's called Miracle Noodle. Well, there's a
Alright,
bunch of different brands, but Miracle Noodle is the one I usually order.
Okay. Cool.
Yeah.
Just gonna turn my gain down a little bit.
All right. And I'm going to.
I was, and then I've lost my microphone icon. Where's that gone?
Take a quick old man break here, and I will return.
But they're definitely not the easiest thing in the world to cook.
Are they not?
Well, you gotta essentially fry them, except without
Okay.
oil. So It's difficult to know when they're done.
Right. Yeah, I follow a guy on YouTube, and he does no oil frying, as he calls it. Just using a drop of water, just to start the process of cooking the veggies and stuff.
Well, these come in a plastic bag full of liquid.
Ah, right.
So you have to cut open the bag and then you have to put them in your colander or your strainer, preferably, and rinse them and shake them out and get them as dry as possible that way, and then toss them in the pan to get as much moisture out of them as possible.
Okay.
And if you use oil, it's going to end up making them hard instead of noodle-like. So,
Right.
or it'll end up holding in the moisture or something. I don't know. I've always cooked them the right way.
Yay! There's Norbert.
Good day.
Good day. Good day, Gobber.
Norbert.
Good evening/afternoon.
Not
How's my
even
crappy
quite
camera?
afternoon yet.
Your camera's all right, Joe.
Okay.
Would you're cutting off the bottom half of your beard because of the
That's
way it's
fine.
positioned, but
Is my microphone level good?
Sounds good here.
yeah, sounds all right.
Yeah, for some reason it seems a bit quiet when Audacity picks it up.
Right.
Or maybe just that's something I have to.
Test. Why is
Have
this
you-
in stereo? Audacity knows better. Oh, this must have been... I must not have used Audacity out here since the last time I reformatted. But I did install it.
Let me check.
How do I
my
switch
other-
back to mono? Options.
Click on your microphone, and I think it gives you the two channels at the top, 1 and 2. One's mono, one's stereo.
It's not. Recording level.
This is just a random mic check.
tool,
Good.
Playback level. No, that's not it. File. It's been so long since I've had to set up anything. I just keep the same settings. But it's set to stereo, and that's not good.
I'll see what you're gonna get to miss, Tony. All the fun stuff.
Yeah, all the fun stuff.
I don't know if we're gonna
Well,
be able to.
You guys set up more recently than me. Do you remember how you switched it from stereo to mono?
I thought if you know where the little microphone icon is next to
Yeah.
Alsa, if you click on the down arrow there, you get two. At 1 and 2, it says mono recording channel and stereo recording channel. So if you pick the first one, that changes it to mono.
I click on the microphone and I get stop monitoring and options doesn't.
No, not
It'd be
on
a
the
drop
mount.
down menu.
Oh, okay,
not
okay.
on-
Oh, yeah. Where it says also.
The
I got it. Mono. There we go.
Yeah.
Yep, now it's mono.
Yeah.
And now it's
Okay.
just the left channel.
Right. Shall we do our silence and start the recording and do the silence?
As soon as
Check,
Norbert, I
check.
think he.
My
Is
recording's
not-
not working.
Is it not?
Oh,
Oh dear.
that's what I get for switching studios. All right, let me try this. Record. And now it's recording. So now I got to get rid of this.
Yeah.
Stop. Delete. Okay, that's all ready.
Okay. So we're cool with that. So we're just waiting for Norbert to come back, and then we can do the audio stuff.
Okay.
Where have you gone, Norbert?
I don't know. He just took
Norbert,
off.
we need you.
Probably a call of nature.
Indeed. Well, Tony, I don't know who's going to keep us on track any longer. I'm afraid I don't have it quite down as
You don't
well
have the
as you do.
You don't have the finger.
I don't have the dexterity.
You got to point at the camera.
Was that it?
I do that. Keep it rolling.
You keep going.
I must admit, all good news to him. But Leo, when he was on the show, 3 hours. Since he left the show, coming in at 2 hours.
Whoa.
It was
We
all his
paired it
fault.
up
We'll,
quite a
we'll,
bit.
we'll blame him.
Yeah.
Sorry, I'm back.
Although he liked to blame me and my bi-weekly
Yeah,
wanderings.
He did.
It's all Joe's fault.
Right. Are you ready with Audacity, Norbert?
Yep.
Okay. Shall we do the 3, 2, 1 record and 25 seconds?
Just
silence?
1 second.
Oh, I guess I should
should
check and
say-
see if anybody is on the live stream too. 7 playbacks, but nobody's talking.
Oh, Londoner's there. He's just said hi. Yusuf's there.
Okay, I see him now. I had to switch. How's the audio, guys? Let us know.
Wait, are we doing the silence?
Not yet.
Yeah, we.
Oh, sorry. So, because I haven't started.
No, none
Yeah.
of
And
us
now I'm
have.
recording.
Right.
Everybody's ready.
We're not doing the silence yet because we haven't done 3, 2, 1 record
Okay.
yet. Are we ready then? Are we all ready?
Ready.
I'm ready. Hopefully.
Okay. 3, 2, 1, record. Yay!
All right.
Woohoo!
Okay, so do the 3, 2, 1, 0, and then we'll hand over to Joe.
Who?
Sounds good.
3, 2, 1,
Zero.
0.
Zero.
I thought Norbert was going to host today.
I never said such thing.
Well, that's because we didn't ask you.
No. We voted you in while you we were waiting for you.
The joys of being late to the show.
Automatic main host duty.
Okay.
All right.
Oh wait. When do we play the music? Before we do the intro, right?
It's up to you.
Yep.
If you can cue the music, that'd be great. It's up to you.
I can indeed. I had it brought up. Where'd it go? Oh yeah. I forgot. I was looking at noodles.
Okay. Over to you, Joe.
Welcome to mintCast, the podcast by the Linux Mint community for all users of Linux. Live from the backup studio, I'm Joe.
Hi, this is Tony, and I'm singing like a swan.
I'm Norbert, and I have created Frankenstein's monster.
And I'm Josh, Slayer of the Mighty Chicken of Bristol.
This is episode 375. This is episode 375.5. Recorded on Sunday the 28th November. Livestream information is at mintcast.org/livestream. If you see something that you'd like to hear about, tell us. Send us email at mintcast@mintcast.org. Join us live on YouTube. Post at the mintcast subreddit. Chat with us on Telegram or Discord, or Facebook, or post directly, mintcast.org. First up in the news, a German state chooses Linux. Slackware is closer to a release date. Cinnamon has an update, and more. In security, more ransomware for Linux. The EU wants more cybersecurity. apt is now safer to use. Then in our wanderings, I have Bluetooth problems. Norbert goes mad scientist. Josh does flip. And Tony has some sad news. In our innards section, we're going to be talking about, what was the topic? Fragmentation in Linux. See how prepared I am for today. And finally, the feedback and a couple of suggestions. And in the news, no more Microsoft. This German state plans to switch 25,000 Windows PC to Linux and LibreOffice. This is from It's Foss. Schleswig-Holstein. Do you want to say that, Norbert?
I'm no German expert, but probably Schleswig-Holstein.
The northernmost of the 16 states of Germany plans to switch to open source solutions on all PCs in its administration and schools. The transition also involves replacing Microsoft Office with LibreOffice. They are ready to adopt open source tools and solutions for everything viable. They have plans to power up their cloud infrastructure, and they also scaled up their video conferencing network using a Jitsi-based open source system. Microsoft is undoubtedly a dominant force globally for its software. However, with an open source model being chosen as a priority by governments, it should considerably influence the people in power to embrace open source. What do you guys think about this?
Joe Ressington and the gang were talking about this on Late Night Linux earlier on in the week. And I think it was Berlin, wasn't it? Or Munich, wasn't it, that went open source and Linux and then went back to Windows.
Right.
But this time, I think this particular state have decided to do it on a gradual rollout, where they're going to roll out some of the applications that work in Windows, like LibreOffice and things like that, to get people used to using the applications before they actually implement the desktop Linux.
Well, not only
So
that,
it's,
but just the buzz that I've read, I believe from our own Telegram, was that, you know, Munich, you tried to roll their own version of Linux. And these guys here are planning on using like, what, Ubuntu or something? Which one was it?
I don't know which one they've actually chosen.
So then they don't have to worry about their own updates and things like that.
Yeah, they
Unless-
are employing a company to actually support it for them.
And that will make things much easier for them.
Is it SUSE?
It might be. I don't know.
So did Munich call their distro Munix at least?
That would be hilarious. No, I don't remember. Now,
Hopefully, whatever way they go, they stick with it this time.
yeah.
This kind of makes me think why haven't more governments migrated to Linux so far? So maybe it was that they didn't want to, but saying this, maybe it's rather that they didn't think that open source operating systems and software were there yet. And now it seems that they think it is there.
Yeah,
I think governments are. Oh, go ahead.
Go on, Josh.
I was just going to say, I think governments are just kind of notoriously slow in wanting to adopt new technology in some cases. I mean, we hear about instances of long-term supported XP still being run in government. So, yeah, that could have something to do with it.
Yeah, that one's not surprising considering how long XP was around and how much actually ran on it.
Yeah, I think one of the things that sounds good to me is that they're not expecting to save a bundle of money. The reason they're doing it is, I think it's more for the ethos of the open culture, and the fact that anything that they develop they've got control of. So if they have in-house developers developing software to run on Linux, they will have control over it rather than buying in stuff. And also, I would imagine security and keeping everything up to date is another big issue as well.
That's a good point.
Okay, moving on. Slackware 15 takes another step closer to release with RC2. After nearly a decade of Slackware 14, the Slackware 15 release is moving closer to debut and now effectively under a hard feature freeze. The Slackware 15 pre-release changelog, though, did mention we're going to have to trend more carefully for things to settle down. So consider this RC2 and a much harder freeze. A test mass rebuild was done here, and there are no more fails to build from source remaining. Does anybody have any information on this one?
I just tried installing Slackware, I think 2 days ago, and it prompted me whether I wanted to install Lilo, which is the bootloader they would use on legacy systems, and of course I said no. Then it prompted me to install eLilo, which was their UEFI bootloader, but since I have Refined, which could theoretically just boot the kernel fine and it would find it, I decided not to use that either. And then when I rebooted and I chose Slackware, I just got a kernel panic. So that's how far I managed to go with Slackware. But I'm interested because it's right up there with Debian. I think they were released around the same time, maybe give or take a few months. And the way I understand it, it is very, and the way I understand it, it is recommended for people who want to learn about how Linux works to try it at least once. So I think I will give it another try. Yeah.
I've never used Slackware proper myself, but I did very early on in my time, starting with Linux. I used Vector Linux, which was based on Slackware. I believe it was a Canadian distribution with XFCE, and it was quite nice, but it doesn't look like it's maintained anymore, I don't think. Slackware does tend to move very slowly, as you said, Norbert.
10
Yeah, someone
years.
did say in some yeah, someone did say in a forum that even though we are already at RC2, they wouldn't expect the final release before next year. Also, Leo could tell us a lot about Slackware. I think it was his I think it was his first distro.
Yeah, I do think he did mention that a couple of times. I don't remember ever trying Slackware, maybe during my distro hopper days, but I don't remember. But it was probably still, Slackware 14. Moving on. Cinnamon 5.2 desktop environment released. The update includes an improved menu applet that now features better keyboard navigation for right to left languages. The ability to hide the app buttons by default and when the menu is closed, and the ability to show refreshed menu items while the menu is open. Also improved in this release are the sound and calendar applets.
Calendar.
Calendar applets, thank you. The calendar applet has support for GNOME's Evolution Data Server unified backend for apps that handle contacts, tasks, and calendar info. Cinnamon 5.2 also comes with an option to disable scrolling in the workspace switcher applet. The ability to check if a Cinnamon spice is currently enabled or not. The ability to disable Cinnamon as the default handler for notifications. A new confirmation dialog when removing a panel. A new toggle to turn the window labels on or off. And improved right-to-left support for the window button layout setting. Cinnamon 5.2 also respects the prefers non-default GPU desktop entry when launching apps with either the dedicated or integrated GPUs.
It seems like a very nice update.
Yeah. Oh,
Yeah,
There's quite a bit in there.
I've not used Cinnamon that much, but consider it, I might go and have a look at it, with all these changes, just to see what it feels like now. Because I know it's got a bit more memory friendly, so it's not a memory hog like it was when it first started.
Do they usually release a new major version of Cinnamon around a half a year before they release a new major version of Mint? Because I think we're around 6 or 7 months from the next.
Linux Mint 21 will come out around about June, July time next year. So if we're looking at the Cinnamon release of that, then yeah, that sounds about right. It gives time to iron out any bugs and stuff.
Yeah, and I never considered how GUIs would handle right-to-left language. That seems like it would be an interesting problem to try and solve.
Be interesting to know in the Cinnamon version of Mint 20 whether we get 5.2 in the 20.3 release, because that might happen if it's stable enough.
Yeah, I'm not sure. There's quite a bit packed into this one. I don't know if there's anything that personally would be super useful to myself in my daily workflow, but I'm certain that this could definitely be valuable to somebody out there.
Yeah.
Okay.
What's interesting is when you try to select normal left to right text, and there's just some amount of right to left text in that wall of text, and then your selection just goes crazy. Also, last year there was a exchange. Also last year there was an exchange. Sorry. Also last year I saw a screenshot sent by an exchange student to on Teams to the group of one of our lectures, and I saw I think it was Arabian, because he had even his taskbar and the window, even his taskbar on Windows, and then the resize buttons on the window decoration was switched. So it was almost as like if you would just mirror the entire screen on Windows. That was interesting.
Cool.
Okay.
The start
Moving
menu might
on.
have also been on the right. I'm not sure.
KDE Plasma 5.24 adds overview effect inspired by GNOME's activities overview. And this one's from Phoronix. KWin has added an overview effect for showing KRunner search results that is similar to GNOME's Activities Overview feature. Other upcoming features in Plasma 5.24 include Discover has added safeguards to block any operations that would end up uninstalling Plasma in the process, since that is probably unintended. The console terminal emulator will release memory when clearing the text and has better text display performance. And a major performance fix for Qt Quick-based KWin effects when running on the NVIDIA proprietary driver.
Any optimization to NVIDIA is a welcome one. Also, I wonder what what made them push this fix to Discover to prevent it from uninstalling Plasma elements.
That's what actually happened to me when I was running Manjaro KDE. It just totally wiped out all of my KDE components, and I lost the GUI.
Oh,
And I
you know
had
who
to
else
end up
was running?
installing-
You know who else was running Manjaro KDE after getting all of their GUI elements wiped on purpose? Yeah.
Was that you as well?
No, that was Linus from Linus Tech
Oh,
Tips.
Linus.
And I think
Oh,
there's a lot of fixes coming down to software management because of that.
Yeah, probably.
Yeah.
Yeah, that is in our check this out later because I wanted to mention a couple of things on there. Microsoft working on Direct 3D 12 video acceleration for Mesa, also from Phoronix. Microsoft's latest work in the area of open source graphics drivers with the Mesa stack is adding Direct 3D 12 video acceleration support. As part of Microsoft's continued work around supporting GUI applications with Windows Subsystem for Linux and mapping Vulkan, OpenGL, OpenCL over Direct 3D on Windows, Microsoft engineers are now working on adding Direct 3D 12 video acceleration support to Mesa. They are also hoping to implement it so that other Mesa video front ends would be able to work off this Direct 3D 12 video acceleration code path. In theory, this would allow Mesa's VA API and VDPAU implementations to be able to run off D3D12 video hardware acceleration in such environments. Trying to trip me up with all those acronyms there. Oh, well.
I'm not sure what those are, but I guess it could also improve like compatibility players, like working with Proton and such.
Yeah, pretty much. Okay. Unless anybody else has anything they want to add to that, I will move on. New features and improvements to expect in GIMP 3.0 release. I thought they changed the name of GIMP. And this is from its FOSS. A new GTK3 based UI which adds support for high DPI displays. Better Wayland support. There's always better Wayland support. Multiple layer selection to select multiple layers and perform batch operations. New plugin API which should allow them to port their plugins to GIMP 3.0. The option to use the Windows Ink API for managing input devices. Improved gesture support for touchpads. Improved file format support for the JPEG XL file format. Support for Adobe Photoshop project files has been improved as well.
Yeah, the last part, it means that you can now work with Photoshop files that are bigger than 4 gigabytes, I think. Which is
Okay.
Cool.
rather large. Which is rather large.
Yeah. But with quality of cameras going up, yeah, I can see why the size would.
Oh, that's right. My mind immediately went to like graphics design and not photography, but it makes sense. Eh?
Yeah. Oh. Linus Torvalds announces first Linux 5.16 kernel release candidate. And this is from 9to5 Linux. New version will add Collabora's Futex 2 system call that brings better performance in modern games with more efficient CPU utilization when using Valve's Proton compatibility tool for Steam Play, which is always welcome.
I recently heard someone, I think it was Chris Titus, who said that the Steam Deck and what Valve is doing will not improve gaming on Linux as much as people think it is going to. but seeing new releases in various software that
Well,
is improving it basically each week, it kind of makes me optimistic.
it's not going to improve native Linux development,
Yeah.
but it's going to improve Proton.
Yes, but then as long as developers are using Proton, then Linux gaming wholly, the Linux gaming wholly, the
Benefits.
Linux gaming wholly, what was the word?
Benefits.
Depends. Yeah, the benefits. I meant to say that Linux gaming will depend wholly on Windows existing and Windows
Well, not
development.
necessarily existing, but Windows isn't exactly going anywhere anytime soon anyway. So
Yeah, that's fair.
and if Windows did magically go away tomorrow and you needed Proton for the games that currently exist, well, we have Proton, and
Yeah.
then we wouldn't need it eventually in the future because everything would go to Linux or whatever replaced Windows. But
But yeah, sure, anything that adds to the kernel that'll make gaming better is got to be good, isn't it?
Yep.
I
If
agree.
it improves that, because a lot of people don't come to Linux because of the inability for some things that they play on Windows don't work in Linux. And over the last 5 years, that's changed dramatically.
yeah,
So
and
anything that continues that improvement's got to be good.
I should add it to my bi-weekly wanderings, and I will. But I have done some recent gaming using Linux on the games that I normally play, so I'll talk about that more in a few minutes. But I was pleasantly surprised.
The Linux 5.15 just released a couple of weeks ago.
I'm not sure. I don't track.
It seems like around a month ago, and they already have the release candidate for 16. So the kernel development never stops, never
Right.
seems to stop.
On to the security update. And first up, Hive ransomware now encrypts Linux and FreeBSD systems. From bleepingcomputer.com, the Hive ransomware gang now also encrypts Linux and FreeBSD using new malware variants specifically developed to target these platforms. However, as Slavic internet security firm ESET discovered, Hive's new encryptors are still in development and still lack functionality.
Yeah, but it's proof of concept, I suppose.
Yeah.
So it does show that just because we're running Linux, we're not immune from these things happening. And if people want to make money out of people, they'll find a way of doing it, won't they?
Yep.
This is kind of like when there was a big news title about a self-driving car causing an accident, and then the developers pointed out, yes, the accident happened, but it was just one accident, and they have been testing them for how many years, and so sorry, and like that, whenever there's a new malware for Linux, it makes the news, but then for each malware for Linux, there are 100,000 ones for Windows developed.
Made
Yeah, but
every day.
if you think more and more of our day-to-day things like banking and stuff like that, our financial we've all got apps on our phones to access our bank accounts and all that, and most of the servers that run that are running on Linux. So if a big bank got targeted with a ransomware gang encrypting their servers, just think of the chaos that would create.
For about 6 to 12 hours.
Yeah, but it's still
But-
not good publicity, is
No,
it?
that's absolutely true. That's absolutely true. And it would be difficult to actually get this into a bank. But if they did, then at most it would be 6 to 12 hours that it would cause an issue. And that's because banks do this thing where they back up everything.
Yeah.
Let's hope there are no fish tanks in that bank. Let's hope there are no fish tanks in that bank.
Yeah, they back up everything. But yes. EU needs more cybersecurity graduates, says ENISA InfoSec Agency. The ENISA InfoSec Agency pointing at growing list of master's degree courses. The EU needs more cybersecurity graduates to plug the political bloc's shortage of skilled InfoSec bots. According to a report from the ENISA Online Security Agency, the public sectors of EU countries should support a unified approach to InfoSec-focused higher education, it says, addressing an issue that is by no means unique to the bloc.
I think this refers back to the last one, really, because if
Yeah.
more and more, security issues, you need more and more security professionals to sort them out or to stop them happening.
You should unretire, Tony.
I was never in that field.
Just pretend. You'll do fine. You know enough.
Yeah, I think a lot of times we tend to think of Linux in terms of desktop terms as we use it there, but it really does run the world, and it's a huge attack vector. So, yeah, the more people working in security, the better. That's for sure.
The back end of the world runs on Linux.
Yeah.
Version 2.3.12 of the apt package manager now prevents breaking your system. The solver will no longer try to remove essential or protected packages. Any dependency problem that would need such a solution will have to be resolved manually. The "yes, do as I say" prompt for removing essential packages has been replaced with an error message. The appropriate command line option needs to be used instead. The app developers thank Linus Tech Tips and System76 for bringing this issue to their attention. I was going to say, yeah, that sounds exactly like what Linus did when he bricked Pop OS.
Yeah.
Yeah, and what's interesting that this news didn't come from any website. I was just updating my Debian testing system the other day, and while doing the update, this just popped up as a message, almost word by word. I was obviously I rephrased it in a couple of places, but this just but yeah, I'm not sure if it was. I'm not sure if this patch was also. I'm not sure if this update was also pushed to Debian stable or even Buster, which is now the old stable. But at least it's coming in bookworm.
Yeah. I would hope sysadmins are a bit more clued up than maybe Linus was when he deleted all those particular files.
Yeah, I saw that on the video, and I could just see it on his monitor, and I went, "Oh no, please don't do that." And sure enough.
Yeah, but because it got upstreamed to Debian itself, then now this will be gradually. Then now this will gradually come down to all of its derivatives.
The power of a large audience.
Using apt on Arch.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Okay, I think I'm more happy about Linus I think I'm happy about Linus pointing out some mistakes and pointing out some things that he had issue with, because when watching the first video I was horrified because I thought this was going to ruin the good name of Linux Desktop forever. But then seeing how everyone just quickly reacted and started pushing patches, and now the second video where they kept complaining about how setting up video, audio, especially window capture and screen capture and streaming is kind of a hassle, then I thought to myself, well, maybe that will be improved as well after this.
Yeah. Well, it was an interesting video, and I'll save that for the check this out section. But
Linus breaking his installation was pretty much the tech meme of the year.
Yeah. Okay, moving on to the bi-weekly wanderings. Now, I'm just going to make sure, because I am playing the transition music. Can the people on the live stream hear that? You should be able to. Let me know. Okay, and first up is me. I mentioned a couple of shows ago that I was testing out a new smartwatch, the Fitbit Versa 3. I really like the more accurate heart monitor and the better battery life and the O2 monitoring, at least for, while you're sleeping. I wish it was active O2 monitoring throughout the day and that you could get it anywhere. But it's still better than, other watches that I've used. But I really disliked the way the data from a workout was presented, and the metrics on the weekly workout and things like that. It just wasn't very informative. But recently I came across a problem that was a hard stop when it came to using the Fitbit Versa 3. It worked fine for a couple of weeks, no issues. But recently I started having a problem with my Bluetooth headsets, where it randomly would pause my audiobook every few seconds after starting. Very annoying. I think the most I was getting was like 10 to 15 seconds, and then it would pause again. Wow, that was really difficult because, the first thing you think of is not your watch causing interference when it comes to your Bluetooth headset. So I went through all the normal testing procedures, restarting the Bluetooth devices, 10 to 15 different Bluetooth devices, and restarting Bluetooth on the phone, and used different playback applications, thinking it might have been an update that messed it up. That didn't help. Everything had problems still, but only with media playback. And calls worked just fine. No interference on calls. Those stayed up, hour-long call, 2-hour-long call, fine. I even switched to using wired headsets for a few days, which was okay, but, it made going on a bike ride a little bit more difficult. I thought I might have fried the Bluetooth inside my phone. I spend personally way too much time on my phone listening to things to have a problem like this. I was considering trying to use the insurance to get the phone replaced, but then I decided to check and see if the issue was a reconnect problem with the watch on a whim. Shut off the watch completely, powered it down, and my audio started working just fine. Bluetooth, no more problems. So I'm back on the Gear S3 Frontier, which looks a lot more classical and has the better post-workout data presentation, but doesn't have a very accurate heart monitor, and for some reason, won't properly count flights of stairs. But that's a motherboard issue. I should probably get a new motherboard for it, and then it might work. Moving on from that, I had several old 18650 batteries just sitting around collecting dust. So I ordered some USB ports and 3D printed several cases to make USB power banks. These are low powered, as in 1 amp max output, but are very good for low power devices like my Bluetooth headsets and the flashlight on my bike. Will work for a week or two on the flashlight on the bike. Plus, it was very fun to do, and the kids liked the banks as well. I worked on these with my son. He loved going through the whole process with me. And I made these using glow-in-the-dark PLA that I had originally got for making Halloween decorations. And I made several Halloween decorations. I might have shown those on the show before, of different sizes, and gave them to my kids and put them around the house. But if you're watching the live stream, you can see one of the power banks that I made. And I made 6 or 7 of them, and I even made one that holds 2 of the 18650 batteries. And I'm really happy with how they came out. And it's a little bit difficult to get the boards that are that size that have more than 1 amp output. I also ordered myself another pair of One More triple drivers off of eBay with unbalanced sound. This can be caused by several different things, and I'm hoping it is one of the easier ones to fix and not a blown speaker. Although I may have enough parts sitting around at this point to fix that too. I'll have to look at the inside of the headset first, and that is a very finicky fix. And I've done that fix before, and that didn't work out all too well that time. But I think I used too heavy a cable, and I'll try some of the enameled wire that I have, which is only 0.1 millimeter wide, but I might have to double up on it just to make sure that I get the throughput that I need, but probably won't need to double up on it. I'm still looking for my next project, but other things have taken up a lot of my time. I have a couple of Samsung buds that need some work. The no power ones, I have not had any luck fixing, even with known good batteries, but I have one that has very low volume on one side of the buds, and I'm thinking that it could be an easy fix if I replace the whole front section with a speaker with from one of the ones that has no power. Hopefully that works out. I'm also looking into PCBs, 5 volt or 12 volt amplifier boards, maybe with Bluetooth, maybe without. And that TV that I was working on a couple of weeks ago, I was, if I can't get it working, I might as well, throw most of it away, but keep the speakers from it, and then 3D design and print a case for the speakers with some vented ports, and add in the amplifier and possibly Bluetooth, and then rebuild one of the music servers that I've done in the past using like Mopedy or something simpler or similar. And there's a couple of different ways I could go about it, especially since I have zero double W's just sitting around collecting dust, and I'd like to put them to use, and I think that would be good for it. And also, within the last couple of weeks, I've been pleasantly surprised. I've ran Borderlands 3 on my garage machine, which I'm sitting in front of right now, which only has Linux. There's no Windows on this machine. And it has run very well, other than still having some issue with the Vulkan shaders. But I was able to have those process in the background, so that way, the game actually starts up immediately instead of having to wait 20, 30, 40 minutes for the game to start while it's processing all the different shaders, because it is a rather large game. But yeah, it kicks off, and yeah, at first, when you first start playing, because of those Vulkan shaders, there are some graphical anomalies, essentially, some blockiness, but that will fade as those shaders process. And it has come out looking very good. Play has been extremely smooth. I've really enjoyed it. Gaming is improving on Linux, and I would say that it looks just as good on the graphics card out here as it does on my gaming laptop inside with the what is it, the NVIDIA 9, what is it, a 960, 980? I don't remember. But the mobile NVIDIA graphics card, the 9th gen one. And that's really what I've been up to the last couple of weeks. Norbert, how about you?
Well, this past week I have created Frankenstein's monster. I was using my desktop environment of choice, which is I was using the sorry. I was using my desktop environment of choice, which is XFCE, and I remembered someone mentioning that theoretically and I remembered someone mentioning it that it's possible theoretically to swap the default window manager XFWM with something like Sway to get XFC to be able to load, to get XFC to work with the Wayland session. But then I thought to myself, well, I have an NVIDIA card, so Sway support is not quite there yet. And what came to my mind is, because I've only used Sway, is i3 because it's supposed is i3 because Sway is a fork of i3, so the configuration should be very similar. So the configuration should be very similar. And I started looking for a guide, and I found a very interesting article that I think I will be putting in Check This Out as well. So you can find it in the show notes for this episode also. And it was very simple. I had to disable XFC session and XFWM from reloading whenever they are not loaded. And I had to install PyCom, which is a compositor, Nitrogen for the wallpaper, and Nitrogen, which is a wallpaper. Sorry, my throat. Nitrogen, which is a wallpaper engine, and i3, which was of course the window manager. And I started tinkering with the i3 configuration files, it was indeed very familiar coming from Sway, and I managed to start an XFC session with i3 as the window manager. It wasn't as the integration was fairly good. It was even picking up on so it was basically XFC with the XFC panel at the top where I have it, but each window would but Windows but Windows didn't have a decoration and they would just tile full screen. And it was even picking up on the XFC workspace switcher applet on the and the XFC workspace switcher plugin on the panel also picked up on it. And whenever I would be moving my cursor or my focus to my different screens, it would switch to those different workspaces. Now, the way workspaces worked on this setup was a bit confusing because my displays are not the same because my displays are not the same resolution. So I think I couldn't just swap any workspace to any display that I wanted to. But what I want to, so I still have quite a lot to configure. But what I want to achieve is having my two side monitors to be static, so be always on the same workspace, and be able to swap workspaces from on my main screen. Because I've been using my custom key bindings on the numpad, which I don't normally use for anything else, to be able to quickly tile windows and XFC to the corners or the sides of the screen, and being able to have that done manually with i3 is just really nice. Of course, there's some more XFC. Of course, there's some more functionality that comes with XFC that I lost this way. For example, I can just press my Windows closing keybind on the desktop to be able to bring up that logout/shutdown exit session menu. But my friend who uses Sway a lot told me that things like that are easy to script. So I think I will ask him with help for that. Now, I'm not using this setup currently for my daily driver, but I do have it on one of my installations, and whenever I think it's ready to be used, I will consider switching from it on my main distro. And this made me realize how there aren't and all of this made me realize how there aren't really a lot of window tiling solutions with desktop environments. The only one that comes to my mind is the Pop Shell, which can tile windows on GNOME, but there's no desktop environment which has native window tiling in its default window manager, by default in its window manager. And maybe because Pop OS already has this as an extension, after System 76 will release their standalone desktop environment, maybe this will be better implemented. I also had some fun adventures with trying to get things to work with NVIDIA. Again, I've been using Void Linux for maybe 4 or 5 months, and I liked it. And I liked it specifically because I think it is where I had the least amount of issues while trying to get NVIDIA to run. Especially when I realized that especially after I realized that you can go into the NVIDIA settings and there's a checkbox that says force composition pipeline, and I think most of what it does is it gets rid of screen tearing, which is I think the biggest issue I have had with NVIDIA and XFC, and even once GNOME, which was interesting. So, but I had audio issues. I wanted to record my microphone with Audacity, and at the same time be able to talk to someone on Discord. But for some reason, Audacity would just not let anything else use my. But for some reason, Audacity just wouldn't let any other service to use my microphone input whenever it was recording. And the same goes with playback. So whenever I was playing back something on Audacity, I wouldn't be able to hear anything else. And whenever I was listening to something else, Audacity would fail to play back anything. So then the first thing I couldn't really solve, and I wasn't sure what could be causing this. So eventually I tried switching back from PyFire to Pulse Audio, but the same issues were there. And someone on Telegram suggested to, and someone on Telegram said that neither of them are very good for audio production, so they so they advised me to try to move to Jack, but I really wanted to solve things with PyFire, so I tried Fedora. So I tried moving to Fedora, which has PyFire by default, but on Fedora I had some very interesting and kind of silly issues with NVIDIA. To begin with, there were two packages for NVIDIA drivers, the AK mode NVIDIA and the K mode NVIDIA, and they were supposedly for Fedora and Red Hat / CentOS derivatives, respectively, because the AK mode allows you to, because with the AK mode, when there's a new, because with the AK mode package, when there's a new kernel update on Fedora, it can auto build the kernel modules. But if you were to use K mode, then there's a chance that it can, because it's updated later. So I went with the AK mode. So I went with the AK mode package, and then I tried to, and everything seemed to work good, and everything seemed to work well. I had some screen tearing in the GNOME shell, but I managed to fix that with the aforementioned NVIDIA setting. And then I tried to record my screen with OBS, and it would fail, and it failed, which failed. And I tried to. So I have to look up something for this. Okay, so sorry. Then I tried recording my screen with OBS, which didn't work. It was complaining about. I'm not very familiar with how encoding works, but it was complaining about. I'm not very familiar with how encoding works, but it was complaining about MVENC, and the reason. And as I later found out, there are two versions of the FFmpeg package, one in the main Fedora repos and one in the RPM Fusion repos. And to get OBS to work on NVIDIA, I needed the package from the RPM Fusion. And in order to get OBS to work, I needed the one from RPM Fusion. But the problem was that I already had RPM Fusion enabled, so I'm not sure what the problem was, and I couldn't figure it out. So eventually I tried a fresh install of Fedora, and tried to pay attention to what I installed in which order. I installed the AK mode NVIDIA package. So sorry. First I enabled the RPM Fusion. Then I installed the AK mode NVIDIA package, and eventually Audacity and OBS, and it managed to work. And this time it worked. I could record my chair creaking. And this time it worked. I could record my screen in an Xorg session. But after I rebooted, the next time I booted up the system, it would just give me the same. But the next time I booted into the system, I would just get the same error message again. So I tried to find a workaround. I tried to find a workaround for that, but I couldn't. Maybe if someone had some experience with maybe if someone had experiences with this, I would if someone had experiences with this, I would be glad to hear. If someone had experience with this, I could. Sorry, I can't speak. If someone had an experience with this and has a solution, I would be really happy to hear about it because I really like Fedora and I've been using it on my laptop and tablet problem free. But once again, but the whole thing about having two separate FFmpeg packages, even though I think I had the correct one both times, but it still didn't work, it's a bit weird. I respect Fedora's opinion. I respect Fedora's decision to keep free and non-free software in different repositories. And I'm not sure if this version of FFmpeg was the RPM Fusion free or non-free repositories. I have to look that up. But does anyone of you know why there's an RPM Fusion free repo and a non-free? Couldn't the free software just be in the main Fedora repos?
I don't know.
Sorry. I also considered going with Debian, but the problem with Debian is that it didn't. But the problem with Debian, even Debian testing, it doesn't have the latest NVIDIA driver, which I would really benefit from. So I decided to give Arch a try. I have never daily driven Arch on this. I have never daily driven Arch on my main computer because I had some weird, and funny enough, because I had some NVIDIA related issues, which is not surprising, and which now seems to be gone. So I set up Arch with XFCE, the NVIDIA drivers, and this time I decided to go with the Zen kernel because I've had people mention to me that on a desktop computer you should consider using the Zen kernel because of its performance rated. Because it's better for performance. And funnily enough, as much as Arch's reputation is it being a hard to set up distro, time and time again for me it proved to be the best it just works distro. Because at this time as well, it managed to check all the boxes for me. It had an up-to-date version of the NVIDIA driver, and it worked properly. And I could also get Pipewire to work properly, no problem. So it's funny, especially after what I. It's funny, especially after a discussion about EndeavourOS 2 weeks ago. Now I'm daily driving Arch, which I haven't done on the desktop before, only on my laptop. And for a while I've been using EndeavourOS on my laptop, and I think I've told myself, well, I could switch back to Arch, but by using EndeavourOS I can afford not to associate myself with some of the elitism that with some of the elitism that you can see with some, not a major portion. I think it's just a narrow portion of the Arch users. But now I realized that's not really a problem because even if I wanted to use Arch, I don't have to associate myself with being an elitist. And of course, I don't see myself as an and I just wanted a distro that works. And funnily enough, this was the perfect one for my use case. And this ties nicely into our topic. And this kind of ties into the topic for our inner section. So I don't think I will be saying more about this here. So, sorry, show notes. So Josh, how has your 2 weeks been? So Josh, how have your 2 weeks been?
Oh, not bad. Harkening back to the last episode, I spent Thanksgiving Day using one of my old flip phones from 2019, a Coolpad Snap, just kind of for fun. And the calls were excellent, good quality. I heard people clearly, and they heard me clearly. But the texting was really dodgy. The keys ranged in sensitivity from overly so you'd get a bunch of different key presses when you pressed it once, to basically have to smash to get it to register. So, yeah, that was an exercise in futility, really. If I use my phone primarily as a communication tool, then it would probably be acceptable. But the lack of a proper web browser and access to applications I rely on daily means that I'm reluctantly going to be locked into the Android ecosystem for the foreseeable future. So, yeah, speaking of Thanksgiving, I hope those that celebrated it had a wonderful day with their friends and family. I had a pleasant day at home, and my mother cooked us a magnificent dinner, and I'm sure that most out there will agree there's nothing quite like mom's home cooking. I've been asked by a good friend to build his next gaming PC for him, despite my warnings that now is an awful time to build due to prices and parts availability. He's decided he wanted to move ahead anyways. So normally I don't mind doing builds for people, but given the fact that the video card alone cost him $1,500, I'm feeling a little bit uneasy about doing this one. Needless to say, there's going to be a lot of investment in this machine, and yeah, I'm feeling a little hesitant about handling the parts. So I definitely have to remember to wear my static bracelet on this one. Uh, the case is also going to be tempered glass all the way around, so cable management is going to have to be on point, and that is certainly not my strong suit.
Don't feel bad. Cable management, I'm horrible at it.
Now, zip ties, lots of zip ties.
Mhm.
So, yeah, I resubscribed to YouTube TV after canceling a long time ago due to the constant price increases. It represented good value when it started initially at $35 a month. I thought that was an acceptable price point. But now, just for the base package, it's up to $65 a month. So, combined with the cost of all the other streaming services I utilize, uh, my bill basically is now beyond what I used to pay for cable. And I think this is a problem a lot of people that are cutting the cord run into. So, this is just a temporary resubscription for me. It's going to be a month or two at most, and then I'm going to cancel it again. But yeah, I wish there was a way that we could get things. I know we used to wish for everything kind of a la carte and all this, and it's kind of come back to bite us. Now it is a la carte, and everybody charges a little bit, and it's combined to add up to more than previously.
Well, everybody's not charging a little bit. I mean, 65 is not a little bit.
Right.
65
Well,
is
if
a
you look
cable
at their-
bill.
Yeah, and then if you look at all the services there, you can potentially add on top of it to build it out. I mean, you could easily wind up paying over $100 just on YouTube TV. So, yeah, it's quite expensive. So, again, only temporary, and then I'll be switching it off and just using my basic services again.
Yeah, the biggest problem with streaming is fragmentation. Because if I want to listen to music, I can just subscribe to either Tidal or Spotify or Apple Music, and I would get, I think 95% of the music I listen to is on all of them. But if I wanted to watch something that's only on Netflix, I have to go to Netflix. I want to watch something that's only on Disney Plus, I have to go to Disney Plus. So I really wish, so I really, so I really wish there was this, so I really wish, so I really wish a so I really wish a similar solution would exist on streaming that we have on music streaming.
Eventually, I'm sure someone will come out with something similar to what we had with cable, except all online, where all of these different services are packaged together. And hopefully
And
the
then
cost
we
will
can
be
start the
slightly
complaints
less.
all over again.
And start the complaints all over again.
The problem is
And-
that we can have this solution with music because the music streaming, because the music streaming companies are not the ones producing the music; they are just distributing it. But with Netflix and Disney and Amazon, they are producing the original. But even with shows that are not the originals, there are inclusive. They seem to have inclusivity deals, which is
Well-
interesting because with music because in music there don't seem to be because in music there don't seem to be many of those. I think a couple of years ago there was a scandal about I think it was Kanye West who had a new album release, and for a while it was only available on Tidal. A lot of people who were using Spotify and other services were very upset with that. So even if they wanted to do something for music, it wouldn't really work.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, even your different broadcast companies are coming up with their own streaming service, and if you want things from CW, then you have to subscribe to CW. But I think they do have a temporary thing where when it first comes out, it's free, but that's just them as an example. And then there's Hulu, which is a part of Disney but has their own shows. And
Is it a part of Disney?
yeah, I think Hulu is owned by Disney now. I'm not certain of that, but I think that's what it is.
And what doesn't Disney own?
Right. And then there's Crackle, which is
Microsoft.
owned by Sony, and they do have a free portion, but then they also have a paid portion, and et cetera, et cetera.
What I found to be the best solution so far is subscribing to only one of the services at a time, and when you run out of things you plan to watch, you just switch the next month, or maybe 2 months from then you switch to another one, and then a couple of months later you switch to a third one, and so on.
Well,
That way you get all the content from all of them and only have to pay for one at a time.
I have two services that I pay for right now. One of them I get through T-Mobile, and one of them I get because I have Amazon Prime. So I have Netflix and Amazon Prime Video.
Very good. All right. Well, it's with much reluctance that I hand this next portion off to Tony. Tony, can you please update us on what's been going on with you?
Right. Okay. Well, the last couple of weeks have been good and bad in parts, as they say. My aches and pains don't get any better, and my wife's been under a lot of pressure at work. She works in the health service here. Although she's not a clinician, she works in data collection and she works on intensive care, and there's a lot of pressure for data about COVID and all that kind of stuff, and it's been affecting her health as well. So as a result of that, I've made a decision for the time being. I'm going to step down as a host on the show. So this and the second half, if you're listening to this after its release midweek, it'll be the last time that I'm going to be around, at least for a good few months. If things improve, I might come back, but for now, as I said in the intro, it's my swan song. So I hope you've enjoyed my contribution to the show for the last 3 years, but for the time being, I'm going to be kind of sitting in the background listening to what everyone else is doing. So on a more positive note, while the joints are still in good working order, last Monday I was able to go out and enjoy a day's walking with my wife and a friend. We had a glorious day here in Blackpool, and so we walked from South Shore up to an old fishing town up called Fleetwood, north, about 12 miles north of Blackpool. We took a very leisurely pace of about 3 miles an hour with a stop for lunch, so it took us about 5 hours to get there, and another hour to get back by to the car by tram, or trolley car as you Americans might know it more familiarly. And like I say, the weather was great, so it was a brilliant day out and we had a really good time. The last couple of weeks I've not done much in the way of tech or modelling even, but I've been buying some models for future restorations and made a couple of very good Fleabay buys. So I did make one purchase that turned out to be a total dud, and it was totally not what was described in the eBay description. But I complained to the seller and I managed to get a full refund, and I actually had the refund go into my bank yesterday, so I know I've got it. I was really surprised because the actual seller had 100% positive feedback, and I actually fed that back to him and said I was really surprised. So I've just put it down to experience. I got my money back, so that's I'm really happy with the way that worked out. So you live and learn when you buy things on Fleabay, so that's the way it goes. So that's it for me. Shall we move on to the Linux Innards?
Sure.
Right.
Now, here for the Linux Innards, we're trying out something a little different in the way that we discussed this. It's going to be a lot less linear than normal and hopefully more of a free-flowing discussion. And our discussion topic is going to be fragmentation. Is the increasing number of distros and DEs good or bad? And hopefully we can make this last 30 to 45 minutes and keep Tony on as long as possible. He can sleep next week.
Agreed.
Now, I'm just going to kick off the conversation a little bit here and say that the fragmentation of distros and the new distros and desktop environments, all of that is inevitable. In an open source environment, you're always going to have people with different ideas, or people that disagree, or people that simply want things their own way, or simply want the experience of creating their own distro and desktop environment and letting it run. So inevitably, somebody's going to grab this open source code that they're allowed to do, make the changes that they want, and redistribute it. And then a lot of times it's either going to come out really well or it's not. And in most cases, it's not, obviously. And then in most cases, even if it does come out well, unless that person can get more people on board in a year, 3 years, whatever, it's going to die because no more updates unless somebody takes it over. What do you guys think?
Yeah, I was, one of the things I thought when I saw the title of this was it's just one of the benefits and one of the drawbacks of a free and open culture in Linux. As you say, Joe, people create a Linux distribution to scratch their own itch, and some of the most loved distributions over the years have started that way. Because someone wants to scratch an itch and they create their own, their own version of Linux the way they like it, and maybe they'll bung an ISO out on the internet and say, "Give it a try, see what you think." And some of them even survive longer, after the original creator moves on. Some of them, one of the ones I can think of particularly, because I know the creator of it, Phil Newborough, and that was Crunchbang. Phil created Crunchbang because he wanted to create a Debian-based system that he, that worked for him, and he did it, and he put the ISO up, and people liked it. So for a while, he carried on developing it, and then life took over, and he had to move on. But other people in the community decided to pick it up and run with it, and it lives on in a couple of other distributions. One of them's Crunchbang ++, and there's a couple of others that are based on it. So, that is one of the things that Linux is all about, as far as I'm concerned, is that choice and that freedom to be able to do that kind of stuff.
Yeah, it's really not unlike Solus, is it? With Ike and his situation, where he started that and then eventually stepped away from the project, and that got picked up as well. Yeah.
I want to give a shout out to Bunsen Labs Linux, which is another successor to Crunchbang, and it also uses OpenBox, and I think it's one of the most polished Debian-based distributions. But this brings us to the question of independent. This brings us to the question of independent distributions and those that are based on other distributions. Because I think the number of derivative distributions increasing doesn't necessarily hurt the platform as much. I think there are around 10 or so major independent distributions that I like to sort of call the Big 10, so to speak, which are Debian, Arch, Fedora, OpenSUSE, Gentoo, Solus, Slackware, Void, NixOS, and Alpine. I'm not sure if Alpine fits this, but I think I looked at the Google Trend searches and it's pretty high up there. So and not all of these are meant to, and not all of these are widely used on the desktop, but around half of them are. So I think this, and I think the number of and I think this number of major independent distributions is somewhere around just the right number. So the bigger question is, so the bigger question is, and I would also argue that Ubuntu could be in this list as well, because Ubuntu isn't really downstream, because Ubuntu isn't really based on Debian in the sense that it uses the Debian distros because they have their own repositories. Sorry, because it doesn't directly use Debian's repositories, they have their own repos. Because the initial idea with Ubuntu was to take packages from the unstable or testing Debian repos and maintain them for Ubuntu, so the packages in Ubuntu would always be more up to date than Debian testing. So I think the existence of Ubuntu in that sense is pretty much very well justified. But there are distros, and then of course there are distros that are forks of some other distro that hasn't been around for a while. For example, OpenSUSE and Fedora were both forks of the original Red Hat distribution, and one could ask the question whether it's justified to have both of them around. Both of them have very up-to-date packages. Both of them are RPM based. But then you think about how both of them are upstream distros for different enterprise distributions, and I think it's a good thing for both Red Hat and SUSE to be able to control their respective upstream distributions for what they want to end up with in their downstream enterprise distributions. So, and I did use the phrase platform to describe Linux, but I recently came across an argument which is interesting, that Linux isn't a platform because there isn't a unified way to develop applications. Like, for example, there is on iOS or Android or macOS. This was from the Linux experiment, and Nick said that even though GNOME is restricting, even though GNOME is restricting customization, that it's actually bringing it closer to be a platform, and developers would benefit from that. So what is your take on that? Sorry, I said too much. Don't take.
Oh, no. Well,
So yeah, but so basically these three ideas that we shouldn't, when we talk about the number of distributions, we should consider independent distributions and derivatives, and the fact that some of them are influenced by companies, and the third one is there even a platform for Linux for developers to use?
well, why wouldn't it be considered a platform? Because it's not standardized?
Yeah, time and time again, I would download an application and it would be using it's using Qt, which don't tend to look good on a GTK system.
Well, I
For
think
example.
that's one of the few parts of fragmentation that are bad. You don't always get a first class experience when you're using a different toolkit across platform, the non-native toolkit for that underlying OS. So if there is a disadvantage, that's probably one of them. But
When I tried,
Go
sorry,
ahead.
go on. When I tried downloading Transmission, which is the BitTorrent client, I found different packages in Debian for transmission-GTK and transmission-Qt. So the developers, or maybe it's not the same developer, they might be forks. So you have the option to download a GTK-based or a Qt-based version of the application, which I think is fantastic. But but it's not really a solution, because that just gives more work for developers to do.
Right.
In some ways, you could probably think of distributions or the Linux ecosystem around the application manager. So you've got apt, RPM, and the Arch,
Pac-Man.
DAUR, and things like that. And most people stick to one of those choices for their main system. So I got into Linux through Ubuntu. So most of the more usable distributions for me are based on apt. But I have played around with RPM and the other systems, but very, I keep coming back to app-based systems because dev-based systems because that's what works for me.
Yeah,
Yeah, and
likewise. That's where I started as well, Tony, was in Ubuntu, and I've always come back to Debian. I'll go out and play around and try others, but yeah, the app-based system, yeah, it's just where I feel comfortable. And
maybe I'm also coming back to Arch because I started on Manjaro.
that could be. And I think that, a lot of people, they like to say that fragmentation's this huge problem, right? We just have this massive problem. But I think it's mostly within the Linux community that we discuss this and we see it as the problem. I don't know if this is such a big deal to people externally.
Well,
I don't know. Maybe
I
on the
would
enterprise
say
side.
I would say that there is a small problem, and just with desktop users, people transitioning from Windows to Linux, and I've even included this in my notes. It can be somewhat daunting for a new user to, say, okay, I want to get rid of Windows. I heard about this Linux. I'm going to go look and see. Well, there's 100-something distros. Which one do I pick? Which one's best for me?
The first one that comes up on Google in my case.
Well, yeah, and 9
Which
times in
happened
10,
to be
that's
Ubuntu.
going to be Ubuntu, yes.
Yeah.
But yeah, it could potentially be daunting. And there's a lot of other podcasters that say that that's the issue with fragmentation, is that there's too much choice for new users, somebody that knows absolutely nothing about Linux in general. But I think you're going to end up with the most popular ones solving that particular problem.
But my counter argument to that would be that the majority of people who go looking for Linux on their own are usually a little bit more tech savvy. If it's your granddad or your grandma or your Uncle Fred, and he knows you're the techie in the family, and he comes and asks you, you're going to tell him something that's the easiest thing to transition. You know. But if it's someone who's coming from Windows, who's say a Windows power user, they're going to know where to find information about the best transition from Windows to Linux. So I don't see it as a major issue in that respect.
And I think
Yeah.
you're going to find more of that like in forums, where I think confusion comes in, because then you have a bunch of people that say, no, don't do that, don't use that, don't use this, I have the right answer. And then someone else comes in and says, no, that's garbage, you don't want to use that. Or you're using Ubuntu, that's not really Linux, you need to be using this distribution, that's, and so on and so forth. And you start kind of getting those community arguments, and I think that that's where this becomes an issue.
The
Like, again, in
forum-
my case,
Yeah.
when I found Ubuntu, I literally thought that was Linux. I thought, oh wow, okay, so this is Linux, cool, I've got it. And it's just thing, and then when I found out, through reading through all these different forms, I was like, holy cow, there's all these other distributions and desktop environments. And for me, it was great. I wish I had one of those like Men in Black flash sticks, so I could kind of temporarily, wipe my memory. I'd love to go back through that initial, going through all those distros again and going through all those desktop environments. It was so much fun. And eventually, you find what your workflow is well suited to.
Yeah.
And you find that distro, you find that desktop environment, and I think
Yeah.
you settle down. If you're a techie, like kind of we are, but for a basic user, like you were saying, Tony, if you're going to set somebody up, they're probably not going to go distro hopping. They're probably not concerned about fragmentation. They're probably going to take what you put on their computer, and they're just going to use the pants off it. And as long as nothing breaks, they'll be happy.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And if
set 'em up
it
with
does break, they're going to
XFCE.
come and ask you anyway.
Right.
Set them up with XFCE or set them up with Mate, something that looks very similar to, old school XP, and just let them run with it.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
And you mentioned the forums, and I do want to say that the forums elitism that you used to see is nowhere near as bad as it was.
Yes, but still, if you start searching for a distro and you end up on a and you end up on the forum of a specific distro, then the people giving advice there will most likely be biased toward that distro.
Right.
Oh, of course, yeah. Absolutely. I still say Mint's the best.
Yeah, if I had to install Linux to anyone's computer, I think I would install mintXFCE with the Papyrus icons, and that would be perfect.
Yeah.
Yeah.
If they have a more powerful computer, maybe even Cinnamon.
Well, so what do you guys think about people that they do very little? They'll take a distro, they'll theme it, wallpaper it, because this is a common complaint on the forums as well, right? And they respin it, throw it into an ISO, and throw it out there. I mean, and then people get to arguing: is that a distro? Is that, do we really need that? Do we? And as far as I'm concerned, I see it all as kind of like a big, like a developer art gallery, and we get to kind of walk down it and take a look at everybody's different vision of what they think is, whether it just be aesthetic or functionally the way they want to use a computer. And hey, just along the way you might find something that works
Yeah.
for you
Yeah,
and that
yeah.
you
Probably a bit
enjoy.
before your time, Josh, but Sue's actually used to have the ability that they used to be able to go onto a web page, and you used to be able to create your own ISO,
Oh,
put
yeah.
all the stuff you wanted in it, and then spin an ISO up. And load that onto your PC. So you could actually, there was actually a way of doing that. That was one of the major players in Linux actually create. Obviously, it was based on SUSE, but you could spin it up and put exactly what you wanted in it, and take out the stuff you didn't want, and then spin up your own ISO.
Oh, that's kind
Yeah.
of neat. Yeah, I wasn't aware of that. That would have been neat to play with.
But is, Hannah Montana Linux its own distro? I mean, basically
Probably
it's
not.
just
Probably not,
theming.
but
Well,
it's a bit of fun, isn't it? It's
Well,
part,
yeah.
it's
No,
another,
I'm-
it's another part of the community.
I'm actually willing to say that if they're willing to maintain those changes that they made when there's a kernel change, when a new version of Ubuntu comes out, if that's what it's based on, and they provide a way to download it after they've made all the changes based on the new stuff that comes out, then yeah, that would be a distro. They are distributing a version of Linux.
And thanks for bringing that one up, Joe. Hannah Montana, absolutely. That distro has to come up, or you don't have
Yeah.
a fragmentation conversation.
Right.
well, I have an interesting take on maybe not what is or isn't a distro, but maybe what determine what is definitely a distro. So I would say if they use their own. So I would say if it uses its own repository, not for everything necessarily, but some of the stuff, it is a distro. For example, EndeavourOS and Linux Mint and Pop! OS are all what I like to call overlay distros, which take the existing repositories. So they take the existing repos of Ubuntu and Arch, and they layer their own repositories on top of that. But at least Mint does. I think there are no packages with the same name on EndeavourOS and the Arch repos. So even if they have some small repo for their customization or for their customization or some themes, and they maintain those packages in their own distro, I would say they are pretty much a distro.
Yeah, I'd agree. And you guys remember that article from, it wasn't so far back, where it was argued that Linux Mint ought to not exist any longer, that they should just basically be a Cinnamon team, because it's basically Ubuntu with Cinnamon slapped on top.
I
well,
disagree with that. 'cause
Yeah, I think a lot of people
Now you
did.
completely
Yeah.
disagree with that, because they are doing their own packaging, and they've really kind of split from Ubuntu, especially when it comes to things like snaps. But there was a time where it seemed like Linux Mint was just Ubuntu Cinnamon, and I could see
Yes,
where
but
some
back
people
then-
would get that impression. But
Well,
that's
in
no
the
longer
early
the
days
case.
of in the early days of Linux Mint, it was a way. Ubuntu wouldn't include a lot of the proprietary codecs. And there was a community thing called Medibuntu where you could download that, and that would enable the proprietary codecs. after the fact, but you needed to be a little bit techie to get all that to work. Whereas Linux Mint, when they span their original distro out, one of the things was it was sold on the fact that all those were included. There was an ISO for areas of the world where if you had those codecs on your machine, you were breaking the law. So they did spin two ISOs, one with the codecs and one without it. But you could, for the general user that just downloaded the full ISO with all the codecs installed, you had a pretty good working system out of the box without having to do all that faff with Medibuntu and all that.
I vaguely, because it was so long ago, remember having to, after a new install, go in and manually install all the codecs
Yeah.
to get all the videos working and everything. Oh, that was forever ago.
Yeah, well, Medibuntu made that easier on Ubuntu, but it was still a faff. And there was still one or two things that weren't included in that you had to go and find separately.
And now, generally, if something works on a new distribution and it works really well and it becomes popular, other people are going to see that and they're either going to take that code and get it to work on another distribution, or they're going to see that effect and then recreate it from scratch. So saying that fragmentation there of the code itself, that's also not really a concern, because if it works, it's going to make it into everything else.
Right.
Tony, you mentioned that there was a time when Linux Mint was basically just Ubuntu with Cinnamon. But was it back when Cinnamon was just layered on top of GNOME, or was it already a fork?
No, Linux Mint came out before Ubuntu transitioned to Unity. So Linux Mint originally was using GNOME 2, the same as Ubuntu was. So
Yes, but I think the same could be said about Pop! OS, which is also which is also really close to Ubuntu right now. Because they are just using extensions on top of GNOME, which was, I think it was the same thing with Mint when I think it was the same thing with Cinnamon when it started out.
Yeah, but Linux Mint was around for 3 or 4 years before
Unity.
Cinnamon, maybe even a little bit longer, before Cinnamon and Mate came out. So it was only after Unity became the default desktop in Ubuntu that Linux Mint moved over to Cinnamon as the main desktop release, and then Mate came along and they included a Mate release.
But if there are enough people who like the defaults of a distro, then I think it justifies the existence of the distro.
Yeah.
I don't even think you have to justify the existence of a distro. It's
I agree.
open source. You just, if you want to do it and you have the technical prowess and know-how, then why not?
If you're prepared to create the infrastructure to share that ISO and to, like Joe said, be able to run the updates and release new ISOs when things get updated, then good on you.
Yeah, so if it's just a wallpaper change and you want to spend all the time and money to run a server to put that out there, then hey, why not? But
I like to go up. Sorry, sorry, you can finish this because I was going to mention something else.
Oh no, go ahead. No.
Yeah, okay. I want to go back a bit to the package managers, which I think Tony said that they are what defines an independent distro usually, because there are some independent distros like PC Linux OS or Chaos that use existing package managers, but I would say the number of package managers is also just about right. So my overall take on fragmentation is that choice is good, but you don't want to have too much. But you don't want to have too many options or too few of them. And as far as independent distros go, I think the amount of choice is just right.
Yeah, and when it comes to package managers, I really don't think we need any more. I kind of understand if people decide to build another one, but it's going to be really difficult to change anything in the package manager market the way it is now.
Yes,
Now,
but the fragmentation of distros and package managers usually comes down to a philosophy. For example, when I started using Void, I was a bit surprised when I learned that learned when I learned that they're using their own package manager, which is XZPS. Then I started using it, and it turned out to be even faster than Pacman. So for a while, I really enjoyed it, especially how quick the updates were. So in case of XZPS, I can see it totally being justified because someone wanted to build something that they thought could be better for their use case as this, and it managed to stick around for, I think, more than 10 years now. So
yeah.
Mhm.
But
I
you
think we,
will probably see advancements in things like Flatpak and Snap, and that as computers are getting better, that might take over because they do require a bit more resources, but they are more universally, compatible. So,
mhm.
yeah,
Yeah,
I think the days of the I don't think the days of the package manager are numbered, but I think, like you say, Joe, I think containerization is going to be the way forward in the future.
I think you got that
mhm.
right, John.
I
Yeah,
heard or
and
read an opinion about this that said it would be a good thing to separate system packages from packages that the user installed on top of that, and having different, because I think Snap and Flatpak still count as package managers, but having two different package managers for the system and the user applications could be a good thing. Also, we mentioned how SteamOS was going to be available for anyone to download a few weeks, but what we didn't, but on top of that, it's going to be an immutable system. So the root file system is going to be read only, and but you can still install Flatpaks on top of that, which is essentially how installing anything on Android works.
yeah, and again, they're going to give people choice in that regard too, because you can switch on developer mode, and then you can go on, and it becomes a read-write file system. So, as usual, the Linux community comes through.
The other,
And I had that in the notes actually, that one of the arguments again with fragmentation has been some of these big proprietary software companies not releasing their product on Linux because of fragmentation and having to build for all these different distributions. But with universal package formats now, that
Right.
can't even
With
be argued.
Mm.
Snap,
And what's
Flatpak, App
Right.
Image,
can
especially.
you
yeah,
name a
it
fourth
may,
one,
yeah,
Joe?
may,
I've been thinking about, because I think what's really lucky is that compared to having more than a dozen mainline package managers in distros, we pretty much only have these three universal package managers, and that's a number that's low enough for them to be able to go more widespread.
Well, there's some quasi ones like Docker images,
Mhm.
CSpace, things like that.
but as far as long term support distros go, containerization using snaps, flatpaks, and app image and all that, it does make it easier for the companies that are creating enterprise Linux to offer longer support for distros
To worry
in the
less.
server space, because they don't have they can keep the software up to date using the containerization, but support security on a stable system that they don't have to keep reinstalling.
It's the same thing that, for example, Elementary OS is doing on the desktop for personal use. Because when the first time I heard that they're going to be transitioning all Flatpaks, I was a bit skeptical about that. But if this turns out to be the way that everything is going forward in the future, then they probably made the wise decision.
Now,
The only problem still is that they really need to
Yusef
have a lot more packages than a
Yusef
than
Yuda wants to mention from the live stream Blackmagic Design released DaVinci Resolve as .run file. A .run file runs on every distro. So there's another one.
Yeah.
Oh, I should look
Yep.
into that. But yeah, because the reason, but also the reason you don't want to have too many of these package managers is because even though the number of distros and package managers is increasing linearly, with that the number of possible combinations of these things increase exponentially. So if you have 10 base distros and you have 10 desktop environments, that's 100 possible combinations. And this is why it's really hard for a platform to exist on Linux. Because, like I said, if someone wants to develop an application for Mac or Android, they can use the existing toolkit that Google and Apple provide for it. But there's actually a really good video about this also on the Linux experiment, because if you want to develop a Linux application, you have to choose a toolkit, you have to choose a method of distribution. So even with those, even with the number of those increasing, the number of possible choices, even for developers, not just end users, expand exponentially.
Yeah. I think that it's going to be very difficult for someone, I think, to break into the universal packaging space. It just seems like it's taking some very large companies a lot of resources to try to get this right. And let's face it, they're still not right.
Yeah.
There's still issues with snaps. There's still issues with flat packs. So I don't think this is going to be a case of where we end up with a ton of different options in this space. I think it's going to be a few of them, and I think they're going to get developed and pushed out. And I don't know that there's ever going to be a quote unquote winner of the bunch, but I just don't think that it's going to become as fragmented as package managers have become.
Probably my favorite of the three, so Snap, Flatpak, and AppImage, right now is AppImage, because I think it was LibreWolf, the browser that I tried using Flatpak, that I tried using via Flatpak, and then I tried using it via AppImage, and I was surprised to see that the AppImage was actually way smaller than the overall space the packages pulled by Flatpak occupy. So having everything containerized might. So I think this is due to AppImages not being containerized, but even though they're separated, but even though they are not containerized, they are more separated from the system because they are just a standalone file. Of course, they put some of their config files in your home folder, but they seem to be more integrated into the system, and it's also smaller. So we may be considering a method that isn't. So maybe considering a method that is universal but not as containerized as Snap or Flatpak would also be a good idea. So what I'm saying, so what I want to, so the best way, but AppImage is like a centralized way of management. There is a package called, I think, AppImage Manager, but there are also websites where you can get, and there are also websites where they are trying to distribute AppImages in the same place, but it's not official. So what we need is a main. So what we need is a mainstream app store for AppImages.
You're thinking like a flat hub for AppImages.
Yeah. So basically, we need a flat hub for AppImages where developers of certain applications and programs would want to distribute their own applications as AppImages. Because right now, a lot of applications like Microsoft Teams or Discord only have unofficial third-party AppImages. And it would be nice to have official ones that could even auto-update themselves. Like, for example, how Snaps or Flatpaks have a centralized way of updating. If AppImages had that, I think they would prefer to use them over the other two.
It's a little more difficult to get AppImages to integrate into the system well, so that requires a little more tinkering.
Because for example,
Flatpaks, they, especially here again, to use Mint and Cinnamon as example, I think it's probably the same across all three of the desktop environments. But when you download a Flatpak, it pulls in your theme, and then the rest of the Flatpaks can use that theme. So it makes it integrate nicely, and it pulls it into the menu system and all that, which you don't get with AppImages.
Yeah, now that you mentioned it, I also tried to use the app image of OnlyOffice after using the Flatpak, but the app image just wouldn't start on my system. And when I tried to run it in the terminal, it just it gave me an error that saying that it was missing some library. So yeah, I see what you're saying. Also, if for example the version of GRQ is different on your system than what the app image is expecting, it will also be a problem.
Right.
And I guess back to the overall, I guess another major problem could be that people don't always find the correct distro for them because there is so much choice on their first try. And a new person transitioning to Linux from Windows, this could be a major problem. They installed Linux and it didn't work for them, so they immediately go back to Windows.
Yeah,
Yep, that could be a real concern for sure.
Yeah.
I think that happened when I first got into Linux more and more. I was lucky. I'm not a gamer, so the fact that gaming was a no-no on Linux 14 years ago wasn't an issue to me. But to a lot of people, I know there was a lot of people who got into or tried Linux, around the end the 2007, 6, 7, when Ubuntu started to become popular. But because they couldn't do gaming on it, they either scrapped it altogether or were, kept their Windows machine going because they couldn't do the games on Linux. So really, at that time, Linux for them was just a little toy that they had in the corner.
Right.
But now that's not as big an issue as it used to be.
Yeah.
Well, you could argue that dual booting would also be a good solution to that, but I guess a lot of people just wouldn't like the idea of having multiple operating systems and the increasing hassle to keep them maintained.
Yeah, the problem for me with that was constantly having to swap over. When I originally started dual booting, if it was a problem with the driver for a printer or stuff like that, and I wanted to print something off, I'd have to go out of Linux and into Windows to do the printing and all that.
Well,
So it was such a faff. But nowadays,
and for a
it's not
long
big
time, Windows made it extremely difficult to dual boot for any period of time because they would go in and brick your grub and then you'd fix it and then they'd go in and do an update and brick your grub.
Yeah, it wasn't so much. It wasn't a big issue with Windows XP. I think that came later.
No, 7,
And
8.
I never dual booted with 7 and 8. So with Windows XP, that wasn't so much of an issue.
It's
Yeah,
even
XP
happened once or
support.
twice with 10.
Yeah,
Yeah, I still hear people complaining about it on Windows 10 as well. But did XP support UEFI or just Legacy?
Legacy. I don't think there was a UEFI boot for XP.
no.
So
No.
it would have to replace the Windows bootloader, the grub bootloader.
Yeah, whenever you dual booted, you were using the grub bootloader,
Yes, but
bootloader to
Yes, but in case of legacy booting, it's not really a surprise. The operating systems would argue about being in control of the bootloader.
Mm.
But the thing about Windows 10 is that people now seem to complain about Windows breaking down on UEFI, which is literally just a separate folder, which is literally just a separate directory on the UEFI partition. So why does Windows have any business in messing with that?
They shouldn't.
Because
but
it doesn't like to be, or to share space. It likes to think that it's the only
Or
OS.
that- The only
And even to this day, you can't install Windows as a dual boot after you've installed Linux. You've still got to have Windows on the system first before you
Why?
install Linux.
because it will destroy your bootload.
Yeah.
It writes
Well,
its
I
own
have-
bootloader.
Mm.
And
Well, it basically it'll wipe out anything that's on the disk.
But maybe that's the reason it bricks grub after on an update, because the only
it doesn't necessarily
reason
brick grub either.
Yeah.
What it does is it forces the motherboard to point to the bootloader for Windows as opposed
Mhm.
to the Grub bootloader.
Mm.
Whenever there's a Windows update and maybe it also updates the Windows bootloader, does it reformat the BFI partition? Because that could be a scenario where it would erase grub.
Well, no, because it, like I said, it doesn't really erase Grub. It just points away from it. It points directly
Yes, but
to
that I
Windows,
wouldn't.
and then you can go
Yes,
into Windows and force it back to Grub. But you do have to
yes,
go into Windows to do it.
but I don't think that this is what people mean when they say it's breaking their grub, because you can easily revert that in the BIOS as well.
Well, you can easily revert that.
Uh,
I can easily reverse that.
yes,
But
but the
the
people
general
who
user couldn't.
yes, but the
No.
general users are not the ones complaining on Telegram and the forums about Windows grub. And if someone is using the phrase breaking their grub, I think they are aware of the technical background of it.
Let me
So
tell
if
you,
either
when I got my first Grub rescue screen, that was a
Ooh.
very interesting experience, and it was not a happy one.
There's some devices that I've had where using Grub Rescue was an active part of the initial setup process.
Dear.
I managed to go to not using grub at all on my system. I just went and set up a different. I just went and set up the separate refined configuration files, and they are literally just 2 lines of a config file compared to having a grub file that's many lines long.
Oh no.
I think grub might be overly complicated, so I don't really like to use it.
Remember, now you've
That's like
given
saying
us
X11 is
bootloader.
overly complicated.
We got
Yes, but-
bootloader fragmentation.
Yes, but the reason I'm not using Wayland on my desktop is NVIDIA.
Hmm.
Also, XFC doesn't. I think the XFC devs have updated a lot of their applications to work well with Wayland. The only thing that doesn't work with Wayland yet is the session itself. So if XFC at one point came out with a version with an update that made it usable on Wayland, I think I would be willing to switch.
Youssef had a couple other things to add. Well, when I was in Windows, I started to use open source software as a replacement almost with everything I do. I installed Linux distros on VM. So, yeah, I guess that is a good place for a lot of Windows users to get comfortable with Linux. And then he also said, I often broke my system in the beginning, but I know now how to fix them. Yeah.
That's it.
Well, I will say that when I first started, there was a whole lot more nuke and pave than there is now. Now I'm much more willing to fix than I am to just kill it all and start from the beginning when I
still
mess
like
it up.
nuke and paves.
Hey, nuke and paves have their place, but now it's not one of my, fix this computer.
Go to.
Yeah.
Was the
But
update
sometimes-
was it possible to update from Mint 19 to 20 without reinstalling?
Not at first. I think it took them a while to get the actual update process working. But if you wanted to be an early adopter from 19 to 20, you actually had to do a
Yeah.
full reinstall.
And the,
Do you
and the
think it will
update
be
process,
easier? Do you think it will be easier for the transition from 20 to 21 to not have to do a complete reinstall?
If Leo were here, he would tell you that it's always better to do a nuke and pave than an update because updates come with risks.
Yes, but if for example, I wanted to convince a relative or my grandma or someone to use Mint, and I didn't really want to worry about having to reinstall it,
Look,
for example,
When
7 months from now.
when you're putting an operating system on someone else's computer, they're going to tell you that every piece of data that they have is absolutely important and cannot be gotten rid of. And so your only solution is to update as opposed to nuke and pave.
Yes, that's what I'm saying. So
or you can just back up the home folder
Yeah, try and
and then
convince them.
nuke and pave.
Mm.
But with someone like that, I would suggest if they're on, say they're on the LMD 20, Linux Mint 20, that is going to last for 5 years.
Mhm.
So you've got at least 5 years between install and when you have to do an update.
Hey, Yusuf,
You're
let me
not
know if I'm
upgrade.
mangling your name or not.
yeah, so you could in theory skip every other Mint release and just go from 20 to 22
Yes.
already.
As a matter of fact, that's what I do on my media PC up front because it doesn't have any customization done in the config files or anything else, and if it
Mm-hmm.
blows itself up, I really don't care. It's a matter of minutes to
Mm-hmm.
get it back up and running. So yeah, there's no sensitive information on that thing.
Mm-hmm.
So I just keep upgrading it, and so far it's been fine.
Yeah.
This is also a field where I prefer Fedora's release model as opposed to Ubuntu, because in Ubuntu you have a new release every 6 months, and the main release is that non-RTS ones only get nine months of support. So you either go with always the RTS versions, or you reinstall every 6 months. Now with Fedora, it's the same 6 month release cycle, but each version gets a 13-month support. So in theory, you could skip every other version to not have to update that often, or you could even, or you could even update to each version, but wait a couple of months to see if things are stable enough yet.
Now I will
So I think
say
that
that
so I think
generally.
that
Oh no, go ahead. Go ahead. Finish.
I think I just wanted to say that. So I think the 13-month support model is really nice. I think.
Now I will say that last time I nuked and pave, I talked about it on the show, and I lost some configuration. I lost a lot of configuration because I didn't have it backed up, and it was a rather sudden needing to nuke and pave because I didn't know what the exact issue was, and I needed to be logged back into work, and so it was quicker for me to do a full reinstall right then instead of trying to save my distro. But if I have to do a nuke and pave, I'm not losing any data because I don't keep any data on the hard drive where my operating system is. And I do that on all my machines. The most I might lose is something in downloads, and that's it. I don't know about you guys.
Mm-hmm. I just sim-linked my downloads folder to my other drive, so even that.
I do that a lot too.
Yeah, I keep stuff on the PC on the hard drive, but it's usually backed up to my 2 backup drives as well, so I can always recover it if I have to nuke and pave.
Right. I think I lost my FS tab and my cron tab.
So you're just keeping everything externally.
Yeah. Yeah, nothing stays. Well, I have a 500 gig drive, but the only thing on there is going to be applications. And I do back up my configurations under my home. And that's essentially it. If I have an extremely small hard drive, I will symlink the downloads to an external folder on an external drive, which is what I do with a lot of my tablets. But go ahead.
I was going to say we're starting to talk about stuff that's totally
Yeah.
irrelevant to the topic.
It's
so I
about
think
that
we've
time
probably
anyway.
Exhausted it.
Yeah.
But no, but that's good for distro hopping. So if you do want to try out all of this fragmentation that we're talking about, all these different operating systems, that's a good way to do it. Save your information and then just transfer it into the new one. So there, I made it fit, Tony.
There we go.
Yeah.
And do we have anything we want to add? I think this has been going on about the 30 minutes it's supposed to.
Yeah, just about sim-linking. I actually not only sim-link my downloads folder, but every other visible folder, so the non-hidden folders in my home partition, in my home directory, because I want to have because I'm multi-booting right now. I have to live. Right now I have void and min. No, sorry. Right now I have void and arch on my system, and I want them to have separate configs. So what I do is I just have 2 separate home directories on the 2 root partitions and have 1 big data partition. And the data partition I have the folders, downloads, documents, pictures, music, etc. And I have a script that I run on a fresh instance that replaces all of my folders in home with the symlinks that point to these directories. And this way, whenever I start using a new install, I just have everything and it's not in my home directory, but it feels like it's there because of the symlinks.
Yes,
And I
scripting
also-
is your friend when
Yeah.
installing a new OS.
I also have my .bashrc symlink to this. I have a GitHub repo, a private repo with my .files that I sort of a bodging way to do it, but I just keep those files on the data partition, and then I symlink some of those. For example, I have a bashrc symlink to both installations from this partition. I also have the in the .config/gtk 3.0, the
See,
gtk.css.
you should start your own distro with this.
Yeah, maybe I should. And I actually came up with a really nice name for a distro if I ever were to make a distro, and it was going to be Paguro, which is Italian for hermit crab. But then I realized that there's a website from Fedora, I think, that is called Pagure, which they use to tracking bugs and stuff. So, which is, I thought, oh, maybe just a coincidence. But then I saw that their icon was a shell, a shell, one of the shells that a hermit crab would live in. So I think that concept, that name is sort of taken already, if not by distro, but by a infrastructure based on a distro.
Okay, everybody that's listening, let us know what you think of this different style of innards that's much more free-flowing and less formulaic than what we've used in the past. Maybe we'll use this more. I think it'll be really topic dependent. And unless anybody got any last-minute one-offs that they want to put in here, I'm ready to transition to vibrations from the ether.
Also, Joe, by the way, I use whatever is good for my use case.
Oh yeah, that's
Which
that's all of us.
Which happens to be Arch. Also, I think at this point I'm most familiar with Arch, because whenever
I figured you were just going to say, I use Arch.
No, I wouldn't say that just blatantly. Also, for example, I think I'm just also most familiar with Arch. It might be Stockholm Syndrome, I'm not sure. But when I tried to install a graphical element on Fedora, I was surprised to learn that if I go to systemctl enable GDM, it doesn't do anything. There's a separate command. You have to go systemctl set default graphical target. So that's fine because it's just different, but I'm not sure why. There must be a reason behind it. But since I got familiar with how to do things on Arch, I might as well just stick with it.
Cool. Okay, and now we are going to hard transition to vibrations from the ether. All right. I did get one communications. Our level of communications to the mintCast email seems to have gone down a little bit. So please send us more emails and we will have them on the show. I got one from Joshua Mason. I'm a Tilts listener and have heard you talk about the Dell Venue tablets. Is there a place where you have consolidated the information on which tablets work with Linux and how you got them to do so? Also, I know you have put some on eBay and was wondering if you have any current listings there. Thank you for your help. Now, I responded, no, I don't have anything consolidated, but I did talk about it a lot on one of the recent mintcasts. Basically, Dell tablets are the best way to go right now when it comes to making Windows tablets run Linux with little to no need for modification. The Dell Venue 117130 for the low-ish cost, the Dell Latitude 5290 for the high cost, and the 5285 for something in the middle. Asus transformers do require some extra work, but anymore they're really too slow to be useful. You can get Surface Pros to run Linux, but it requires custom kernels and a bit more maintenance. And I am currently not selling anything on eBay, but I will let you know if that changes. And then I know, Norbert, you also have information about running Linux on tablets.
Yes, but the Surface tablets are a bit different because surprisingly, you just have to disable. Because surprisingly, you just have to go into the UEFI settings and set the USB as the first in the bootloader. And from that from there on you can just install any distro like you would on a regular system or on a laptop, for example. You still have to disable the secure boot as well, which I'm also surprised Microsoft just lets you do by default. You don't have to do any tinkering, any modifications within the bootloader whatsoever.
Okay. And you do need the custom kernel in order to be able to add back in a lot of the functionality that you lose from Windows.
Well, the only thing that really I had problem with the regular kernel was Wi-Fi, because sometimes it was just drop the connection and I would have to reboot the system, both on Fedora and Arch, which are the two that I tried. But after moving to the Surface kernel, which is also very recent, which is also very well maintained, so it's a recent version, only maybe a couple of point releases behind the mainline Fedora kernel, the Wi-Fi problems went away. I read about some issues that were present a couple of years ago with Surface tablets not being able to wake up from suspension, but I had no problem with that in either the regular or the Surface kernel. So if anyone wants to go get a first Surface for Linux, the only thing that is not really solvable, at least on my older one, which is the Surface Pro 3, is battery life. I suspect there are just some specific battery power management thing that Windows can do because it's developed by Microsoft, and that you cannot do on Linux, which is specific to the Surface. But I still do get like it. Yeah, it's also a second-hand tablet, but I do get like 3 hours of watching a movie, or which is decent.
It's good.
I wouldn't expect it to last for like 10 hours, but maybe with something like the Gamepad, so ARM-based processors on Linux, if they are optimized enough, there could be the solution and last as much as, for example, a laptop would, like 10 to 12 hours.
Yeah.
But for now, I'm happy with this one, especially since because of the pandemic, I don't travel much, so I just use it for watching movies at home, where I can just charge it whenever.
Okay, well, and that was the only thing for the vibrations from the ether section. And so now we will move on to check this out. And the first item in check this out is session messenger. And who put that in?
I put that one in there too. So just looking around at alternative messengers and ran across this one. It's a FOSS fork of Signal Messenger, and it requires no personal information, utilizes end-to-end encryption, and goes through an onion routing network. It's cross-platform, available on Windows, Mac, and Linux as an app image, and on iPhone and Android either through the Play Store or you can sideload it as a .apk. So I had my daughter actually put this on her phone, and we've been giving it a little try. And there's a little bit of trade-off with convenience because you can't just go into your contacts. It doesn't use phone numbers, so you can't just go in there and start messaging people. You either have to use a fairly long string of a link, or you have to use a QR code and scan that to get a conversation started with someone to basically sync up your contact. But once you've got the conversation started, then it's really not unlike any other messenger. So it's been fun so far, and I'm going to leave it on here for a little bit and give it a play and see how it goes.
Cool. Let us know.
Will do.
Okay, and here we have the This Is Not Going Well Linux Gaming Challenge Part 2 from Linus Tech Tips. And this is where they're trying to install Linux and use it for gaming and streaming. They want to live stream their gaming session on Linux. And I found this video very interesting because, well, Linus is trying to do it without any actual help. And yeah, that's good for him. But then the other guy, what was his name? I can't remember off the top of my head. Had some interesting issues with audio that we've actually seen on this show with the, I think it's the baud rate, where the baud rate for the system doesn't match for the XLR device that he's using. I think one is 4100 and one's like 4400. And it causes your voice to sound very deep unless you do a restart on your audio device. And I think both Leo and Bo had that problem on the show where all of a sudden their voice was extremely deep and they had to go in and adjust the configuration so that it was working correctly. Oh, and the guy's name was Luke. Thank you. So it was just interesting that, you know, the video played and it got to that part and it's like, I know that problem. I know how to fix that. And I even posted on the YouTube page, you know, where they were doing this. Hey, come talk to us at mintCast. We know this problem. We're quite willing to, you know, work through some of these things with you. And Luke is actually on Mint, which is also really cool. But I think they deleted
Yeah.
it because I put the mintCast link in there.
I think YouTube hides
Oh.
those automatically and flags it as spam if you put a link in it. But yeah, I think that is a specific. I think that's an issue specific to Power Pulse Audio, so
Yeah.
it might not be present on Pipeware, which is another reason for distros to adopt Pipeware.
Yeah, and you know, in the first one, Linus had a lot of issues with Pop OS
Audio.
and audio. Well, yeah, and audio, and they had some issues getting OBS to properly select windows. But I found that you can get it to select it the first time, but then if you leave and come back, it won't necessarily select the correct window, and you have to go in and manually tell it again. But that's the only thing I've seen there when it comes to window selection. And sometimes it's easier just to, you know, share the whole screen.
I really do want window cap. Yeah, I think what's another thing that would be good to improve is window capture on Wayland, because I think on Wayland you have the option, because I think Wayland has better management for multiple displays and even for multiple refresh rates. And the other day on a lecture that was held online, one of my someone from the university was sharing just a window, but we couldn't see a pop-up window, and he wanted to show us how to use the software. So we ended up having to share his entire screen, but since he was using OpenBox, so Xorg, and he had two displays, he had to. This was on Jitsi, and he had to share both displays. So it was just a super wide screen share, and we couldn't see anything. So we actually had to disable one of his screens to be able to only share the other one. So if I think this is not a problem on Wayland, but then again, and I think for example OBS can now properly do a screen share on Wayland, but I'm not sure about things like Teams or Discord or even Jitsi. Fedora might have a workaround for that. But yeah, I cannot say this enough. I really want Wayland to I really do want Wayland to improve in the future.
It will.
Because like you said, Xorg itself is very complicated and it's unnecessarily complicated.
Okay, and then you had posted something about hot edges and custom hot corners extended?
Yeah, once again, I have brought a couple of GNOME extensions that I tried on the desktop, and these are specifically for people who want to use GNOME with a mouse, with a regular mouse, but they are not comfortable with the regular GNOME workflow with a mouse. So hot edges allows you to have a hot edge, for example, on the bottom of your screen. So if you wanted to open an application with a mouse, you wouldn't have to drag your mouse to the upper left corner, then back down to the dash where your icons are. With this extension, I don't think I've covered this extension before, right? Because didn't find it in the show notes. So anyway, but with this extension, I can just pull my mouse. With this extension, I can just pull my cursor back to the bottom edge of the screen, and it would activate overview mode, and then my cursor would be right next to the dash by default. I can just select an icon, and it also appears to be pressure sensitive. So I'm just trying to select some text in a window on the bottom of the screen, even if I push the cursor right next to the edge, it wouldn't activate. I have to apply some accelerations of force with the cursor for it to open, which is really nice. And another similar extension is custom hot corners extended, with which you can set custom actions for all of the 4 corners of the screen. So if you don't, so for example, if I didn't want to have the entire bottom edge to act as a hot edge, I could just set a hot corner, for example, to the bottom left or bottom right corners, and activate overviews from there. But it goes beyond that. It has actually quite a lot of options you can set. For example, right now I have set for example, right now I have set the bottom left corner to go to the left to the previous workspace, and the bottom right corner to go to the next workspace. So if I wanted to do something on the screen with the mouse real quick, I wouldn't have to switch over to the keyboard and then press Ctrl Alt left and right to be able to switch workspaces. I can just do it with the mouse movement. I have both of these extensions set like this right now, and sometimes it doesn't really. So this way I have to point really well to the corner to be able to go to the next workspace and not activate hot edge by default. But I think if you just wanted to use either of the two, it would be a really nice experience. So if you want to use them with the mouse, I would encourage you to check out either one of or both of these.
Cool.
Thank you for coming to my TED talk about GNOME not being usable on the desktop with them.
Okay, and announcements. Our next episode, 2 p.m. U.S. Central Time on Sunday, December 12th. And you can get that converted to your time zone using the link in the show notes. And our next live stream will be 2 p.m. U.S. Central Time on December... Is it 4th? I don't know why that's...
Oh,
says
the
18th.
live
Saturday,
Yeah, sorry, 4th. I messed
December
up again with the
4th.
dates.
Yeah.
And I will
That's
get
my
that set up for a link here shortly. Please, and as this part of the announcement's new, please join us on Discord if you would like to be a host on mintCast. We need to add another body. I'm not trying to add like 5 more or anything, but I want to get one more in there so that way we at least have 5 total and 4 regulars, and preferably somebody that has a bit more experience with Linux, if you can. Also, newbie perspective is nice too, so don't worry about that. Just, we'd like another host. And you can get the live stream. Go ahead.
I was just saying, correction, the next live stream will be the 6th of December.
6th.
Saturday, the 6th of December.
Oh, that's St.
No.
Nicholas's Day. That's when Santa Claus comes over here in mainland
I
Europe.
hate to tell you this, but the 6th is a Monday.
Oh.
Well, Monday stream confirmed.
Oh, no, I'm on the wrong... Yeah, I'm on the wrong month.
Yeah, it's the
I'm looking
4th.
at the wrong month.
I was
It's
also
the
confused because I just opened the GNOME pop-up calendar here. I was
Go
also
ahead.
confused because I just opened up the GNOME pop-up calendar on the panel, and I looked at the dates, and I noticed that it starts with a Saturday, so it starts with a Sunday and ends with a Saturday, which is unusual because we usually start the week on a Monday, so I had to double check the dates.
It's all right. That'll be a good one for the bloopers.
Yeah, yeah. And you can get that live stream converted to your time zone in the show notes as well. And on to Tony's final wrap-up. I'm Joe, and if you like the sound of my voice, you can catch me on a couple of the other shows, the Linux Link Tech Show. That's tllts.org. You can find me on Linux Lugcast. That's linuxlugcast.com. You can track me down on MeWe, or you can send me an email, jb@mintcast.org. And I do try to respond to every email. And you can buy me a coffee using my Ko-fi link in the show notes. Tony?
Yeah, you can get me on Hacker Public Radio. I'm host ID 338. I'm on Twitter at TonyH1212. I'm still got a mintcast.org email. I'm th@mintcast.org. You can get me at distrohoppersdigest@gmail.com. And if you want to go and watch any of my recent restorations, just pick a little short video of some of the recent restorations I've done. You can go to my YouTube channel, which is Tony Hughes -Diecast Restos.
Norbert?
You can send me an email at norbert@mintcast.org. And that's it.
The other Josh.
You can give me a JT at mintcast.org, Josh Thacker on Discord, and at metal_foss on Twitter.
And Nishant wasn't able to be with us this week, and you can catch him at nishant@mintcast.org, Rycon Ghost on Instagram, Rycon Ghost at GitHub, Ghost.Rycon on Discord, and Maverick00783 at Steam. Before we leave, we want to make sure to acknowledge some of the people who make mintCast possible. Josh Lowe for his work on the website, Hobstar for our logo, InitRD for the animated Discord logo, and Londoner for our time sync. Bytemart Hosting for hosting mintcast.org and our Mumble server, archive.org for hosting our audio files. The Linux Mint development team for the distro we love to talk about. Thanks, Clem. And thank you, Tony, for all the work you've done over the last 3 years.
Very much, yes.
Thank you very much.
I think it's one of the most iconic voices on mintcast. The first time I started
This has been
the
another
show,
episode of
and
mintCast.
didn't know anybody.
The show notes for
by,
this episode are at www.mintcast.org. You can send us email at mintcast
I actually had a fun thing that I would do.
You can find
whenever
more
I listen to
information on
podcast,
Linux Mint at
I would imagine people as little
www.linuxmint.com.
cartoon animals
You can follow both
sitting at the desk
mintcast
with
and
microphones
Linux
and
Mint on
talking.
Twitter at
For example,
mintcast
Leo,
and
I think he was a lizard or chameleon. And you were an elephant for some reason. I'm not sure. Yeah. So paired with your voice, yeah, it was fun. It's
Well,
also.
I know you've taken over the audio editing, Norbert, but if there's any time that Norbert's not available for any reason and you need a backup person for audio editing, give me a shout.
How much appreciated, Tony.
Yeah, I would definitely want to try to edit this one specifically because of the unusual innerts format. I want to see what I can do with that. But in the coming months, maybe there will be a couple of weeks where I will pass on the editing duty. So
I sure hope you're not a stranger, Tony. I'm sure even if you don't decide to ever come back on a full-time basis, if you just have a free Sunday once every great while, it'd be great to have you pop in again.
Yeah.
Thanks. That'd be great.
Yeah, even if you're not as, hands-on, we'd still love to have you
You betcha.
involved.
Thank you.
Mm.
But like I say, I can be a backup if you need me, and if I'm available. Obviously, if I'm not traveling the world or
Yeah, we'll
on a
make you
cruise.
host when I'm sick.
Oh dear. Right, let's stop Audacity.
Stop Audacity. Alright.
Only I brought up one of your restorations on YouTube, and they're just playing in order by autoplay. And I'm just looking at rotating. Wait, is that which one? The MB47B restoration with homemade. That the truck you got made the commission?
One of the ice cream trucks.
Ice cream.
Was the
It says
yeah.
Lion's
No,
made ice cream.
it's the other one with a load of very small decals on it. So if you have a look for that one as well. That was the second one I did.
Oh, I see it. The one that says traditional ice cream.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, those videos are
nice.
actually very relaxing to watch. If you've had a stressful day, you get to sit down and kind of watch that model spin around, and it's
What are they?
almost a
What's
bit
the
hypnotic.
thing what's the thing under it that's doing the rotating?
Oh, it's just a little turntable. You can get them for
Oh,
a few pounds. They're basically jewelry turntables. You know, when you go in when you look in a jeweler's window.
yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, they have little turntables with some of the jewelry on it.
It's a nice way of repurposing something.
Yeah.
I actually considered getting a little. What's the word? I keep. What do you use for weighing stuff?
Oh,
Scale?
little scales.
Scale, sorry, scale.
Yeah.
So scale that is sensitive enough, because I have a scale that I can, for example, measure out the tea when I want to drink tea, but it's only you can only measure to the gram, and it would be nice to measure to the fractions of a gram, because, for example, if I want to measure like 5 or 6 grams, and those jewelry scales that are very small.
Yeah, you can get them.
I'm using quite a big kitchen scale for it. I could actually, it would make sense to get a small jewelry scale for the tea, because that's it's a similar use case. Oh, I forgot to stop Audacity.
Right.
And of course, Audacity still looks ugly whenever I have a dark set, because Audacity doesn't have a dark theme, but all the drop-down menus in Audacity are dark now. And this seems to be the same whenever I'm on any distro. It's a GTK thing. Is Audacity using Qt?
Right.
Export.
That's my audio's on the way to the drive folder.
Not wave, but flag.
And it looks like Londoner wished you adieu in the
just
live.
Yeah, I think that innards came out really nice. I think because I think from day one when I joined, I think that was my idea, that the innards should be this sort of roundtable discussion and not that more linear format.
Well,
So
there's
really
some
happy
topics
that
that really works for, but
yeah.
I'm willing
Not
to try
everything, yeah.
out whatever. I mean, it's not, the Joe show or anything, so.
Welcome to the Joe Show, the podcast by the
Joe community.
the Joe community for all users of Joe's Coffee or something. Trader Joe's. Is that a coffee brand?
No, Trader Joe's is a store.
Oh, yeah.
All right, I think my audio should be up there. Yeah, Joe's.
Mine is still exporting. That's a nice almost 2.5 hours. I think that might end up as both parts should be above 50